Hey there, this is Ryan Kingslien, founder of ZBrush Workshops and the Visualarium. And what I want to talk to you about in this little demonstration is how you just kind of up the game in your models a little bit, and your renders, your real-time renders, your ZBrush renders, whatever works. Okay, so on the left, okay, that's this guy right here, or this gal. Okay, this is just a simple skin shade. I think it's the number 4. Okay, so the material is skin shade 4. The one on the right, this is a custom quad. Okay, and there's a couple of important differences that I want to point out. So one of them is that the specularity is a little more complex than the specularity over here. Alright, and then we're also getting different behavior as the form turns away. We're also getting different behavior in the different colored portions. Okay, and that's because inside this custom quad, okay, first off, it's got 4 shader channels. So let's just say 4 channels. And then also, we've assigned the mixer, we've used the mixer to assign channels. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. We're assigning channels to different hues. Different hues and saturation. Okay, and that allows us to add an extra level of complexity. On top of that, we're also using just subtools to assign different materials to different subtools. Alright, so we really actually have a couple of different materials. Here we've got a custom dual shader for the breasts and also the fat pads. And then we have just the skeleton material for the skeleton with a couple of modifications. But what I'm hoping you see is that we have a little bit more complex of a render right now on our model to the right than we do on the left. And that's all I want to do. I just want to talk to you about getting a little bit more of a complex render. It just makes a little bit of difference in your model. Okay, now for me, the face over here is just so much better. This is very flat and graphic on the left. On the right, that specularity really brings things out. I'm really happy about that. Also, if I was to look at the leg, I just feel like that rectus femoris is just a little juicier. You know, I feel like that material is coming out better. So how do we go about that process? First, let's take a look at skin shade 4. There we go. Now you see it's assigned to the majority of the model, and we've lost a lot of simplicity. What I did is just copied skin shade 4. Alright, and then I went into some quad material that was hanging out down here, and I pasted that quad material into shader channel 1. Not the quad material. I pasted skin shade 4 here. Then I did some minor modifications to the anisotropic diffuse and specularity. I might have adjusted Fong and blend, and then I adjusted ambient and specularity. I also made sure that the diffuse curve was set at a certain range. Okay, those are the main areas. All the rest of this stuff, transparency, noise, color, gel, not really relevant. Cavity, diffuse, not really relevant. Reflection, exposure, not really relevant. Okay, that stuff doesn't really make a difference. I'm focusing on these other areas here. And I just modified them slightly. But then I had a couple of more shader channels to worry about. And ultimately you can see I only really used 2 shader channels. Okay, in this shader channel 2, you'll see it's actually only affecting certain parts of the model. See how we're getting wider in here? The rest of it seems to be having problems. or kind of blacked out. You know, we're also affecting a little bit along the breast. And the reason why it's getting blacked out is because I'm using a mixer to assign the materials. Let me make this really, really simple. Okay, let me just press solo. Well, I don't want solo. Let's come in here and select just these guys, and I'm going to turn off the posterior fat pads. Okay, and then let's turn off the breasts. Let's just look at this, because the posterior and the breasts and the skeleton, they all have different materials assigned to them. So let's just take a look at this. And let's come into just a double shade. And you see we have two shader channels, right? So let's come up here, turn one shader channel off, then turn the other one off. All right? So they're both working together to get the effect that you see on the screen right now. But you can actually have the effect go to different parts of the model. So let's say if you want this white tendinous region, maybe that's a different material than the muscle itself. You want the muscle to be highly specular, have just a lot of specularity to it, but you don't want the tendon to. So let's say shader channel 1, we're going to take our curve, pull it up, take our specularity, and we're going to really just adjust that, just to get a lot of specularity in there. And then we might close that specular curve, come down to anisotropic specular, and really spread that out. And let's just lower that diffuse specularity. Okay. So we've got a good hardcore specularity going on there. A lot of it's spread out, not the fine-tuned stuff. So I'm going to fine-tune it a little bit. And then I might come down to Fong and blend specular and just make sure you understand the different impact that this has. Okay, I'm going to leave it at somewhere around 0.5, 0.6. Alright, but let's say we do not want for this shader channel to be anywhere that there is a white color or a whitish color. That's when you come down here to this mixer palette. Open that up, and what you do is click on the color. You can click inside here and drag to the canvas, and just let's select this red. And we can move that all the way. And now what we want to do is we want to say mask this by hue. So this is only going to affect areas that are actually red. Okay, and you can also mask it by saturation. So you see how it just completely ignored all of the white areas. You can also use hue exponent and really ramp that in. I'm going to leave that at 1. Let's go. And let's turn our hue off, and let's see. Saturation might be the best option. So let's try saturation exponent. There we go, 1.5. Alright, and now I need to really ramp that up, so I'm going to increase the ambient. Okay, and then let's add our second shader channel. Okay, and the second shader channel is actually affecting everything. But let's say we don't want it to affect everything. Let's say we want it to only affect the less saturated parts of the model. And let's turn the other shader channel off so we can actually see better if we're actually accomplishing that. Let me go into shader channel 1, just make sure I have my math right. Yeah, 100. Okay. And so now we have this set to white. So it's dealing with the saturation associated with white. You can see hue isn't really a good fit. Intensity might be a good fit, but not really. I think saturation is pretty good, and you can ramp up that exponent to really force it in there. But I think 1's going to be pretty good. So now we've got a shader channel that is focused on the white areas, and a shader channel that's focused on the red areas. Let's turn them both on, and now we can go in and start to adjust these things differently. So I'm going to take the specularity completely off of the tendinous areas. I'm going to come into the diffuse curve, and I'm going to just spread that out. And anisotropic diffuse, just really whiten those. There's no real specularity to speak of. Come back into shader channel 1. Actually, let's go to shader channel 2, and I want to take this saturation exponent and start dialing it in, because it's affecting everything globally. So there we go. Shader channel 1, let's define the light for that. Okay. Spread that specularity over. Let's come down into our mixer. And I'm going to dial that back. 1.5 was too high. Okay, I'm going to come into high dynamic range and just use that to lighten things up a little bit. Does it do anything to kind of give it some side lighting with that specularity? Sometimes interesting effect. Alright, and now what we really want, in my opinion, is a whole nother level of specularity. We want really 2 layers of specularity, or you want to just adjust the complexity of what you have here. So my anisotropic specularity might be spread too much. And there we go. So you kind of start to isolate these areas. Now the tendons are much more, how shall I say it, they're much more graphic, because it's just this simple whitish shape. Let's come back into skin shade 4, and you see how everything gets treated the same here. All the tendons, everything gets treated the same. Let's come in and go to like a basic material. Everything's the same. Okay, let's come into a just a double shade that we haven't adjusted, or this one is adjusted. So we need to come into, let's say, a tri shade. Turn one of them off. Okay, no mixer on here at all. I might come into the diffuse curve and reset this. By default, they're set quite hardcore. Round that out a little bit. But you see, everything's getting treated the same. The tendons, everything. You see the same amount of detail in here as you do in the muscle. But that's not the same over with this guy that's using multiple materials. You see a different level of detail in the tendons than you do in the meat and potatoes side of it. And so that adds just this little tiny bit of realism, just this extra layer of working with stuff. Okay, now let's say you want to add more specularity to this. How are you going to do that? Let's come in and copy this shader. Let's go into that tri shade, because we want to now paste shader channels into the tri shade, so we get that coveted third shader channel, right? We go back into that dual shade, we go back to shader channel 2, we copy that one. So you see, we copied 1, now we're copying 2. We go back to that coveted tri shade, we go into shader channel 2, and we paste it. Okay, so we basically pasted everything in there. All right, let's come into our double shade. All right, what we haven't done is transferred our mixer material. So let's come to tri-shade. Oh, it did copy. Woohoo! Good times. But we're still getting a slightly different effect. Okay, and that's something you have to keep in mind a little bit. It also, in this case, has to do with wax modifiers. So you'll occasionally see subtle shifts in the hue when you add a second channel, but watch that wax. Okay, and adjusting your Fresnel here does nothing. You have to go for real time anyways. You have to come to render, preview wax, and then that's when you set the numbers. So you can go to 50. That's going to be a little harder. I find 25 to be good, but in this case I think I want 35. You can increase or decrease the radius depending on what you want. See? Come in and blur that a little bit. There we go. Alright, let's get back to the business at hand. They copied the mixer. Great. Shader channel 3. But I don't want any diffuse. Okay, no diffuse on this. Oops. Come in and select shader channel 3 and then take that diffuse down. Let's put that back where it was. Alright. Now, let's increase our specularity. Make sure the shader channel is on. And I want to zoom in and show you what's happening. Alright, so we have one level of specularity which is quite broad. Now we're going to add another layer of specularity which is really tiny and very focused. And this is one of the ways that you can really massage your specularity, is by having these different shader channels that are just devoted to specularity alone, which is pretty cool. Alright, now once you've done that and you've added all that complexity, more than you could get with just a normal material, then you got to come in and start assigning the other materials. So like we'll come into the skeleton material. Make sure the skeleton is selected. Make sure M is on in the shelf, M for material. Go to the color palette, fill object. It's only going to fill that subtool. That's it. So then you can come back to that coveted tri-shader, and there you go. The skeleton is going to have an entirely different material to it, and you can see that it's just a very different render than the meat. You know, and then these tendons have this very nice graphic quality where they're just really simplified. And then the fat. Let's go to the breasts. Okay, the breasts have a very specific double shade on there that's really giving them a lot of life. Okay, in fact, one of the things you can do if you're not sure what is being what's actually there and what's selected or visible, I should say, is you just hide everything else, and then you come up into the material palette. That's what we're working with, and you click this thing that says show used. It's not something you hear about a lot. Show used, and what we see is double shade. So we can just click that and we'll have access to adjusting it. If we turn this back on, just turn solo off and say show used. Okay, let's come in and select one of these guys. We should get a different material. Okay, it should be showing you everything that's visible here. Oh, it's not. It's showing you everything, but we need to come back into that quad. Into the tri, sorry. Yeah. So now, show used, and we've got tri-shader and matte cap. Okay, now let's bring those breasts back into the equation. or just the posterior fat pad. Press Show Used, and now you see we get the double shade. That's being used in the fat. Tri-shade, that's being used in the muscle. Skeleton, that's being used in the skeleton. It's a cool little trick. Makes it really easy to know what materials you have in there. And like I said, people don't talk about that a lot. It's been out there for a while. It's part of the forgotten matrix. Okay, but if we look at the double shade that's being used, it's pretty simple. It's just two diffuse, two speculars focused in one area. Diffuse is spread across the whole thing, and it's really just designed to give you a nice broad light with a wax modifier in there. Just wanted to keep it graphic. Notice that the diffuse curves are very, very, round. Watch what happens when I take that the other direction. Okay, let's just go into solo mode. Let's select the posterior, go into solo mode. It just gets harder. As you go in the other direction, the light will spill out from the center all over. And that's what you want when you want this more graphic kind of ambient quality in there. So let's go back to our tri-shade and just make sure it all made sense. So I'm going to come back in, select the skeleton, and let's zoom in on the parts. So we have tri-shade, double shade would be in the breasts, so let me take that down and press N, B for breasts, and turn the eye icon on, go back up, select the skeleton. Show Used, okay. Double shade, tri-shade, skeleton. Okay, the tri-shade has two specular channels. It also has two diffuse channels. Like number 3 is specular. They're all kind of specular, but I think shader channel 1 was more specular. And then otherwise, shader channel 1 and 2 are also diffuse. Alright, and shader channel 1, let's do this in red. Shader channel 1 is going to the meat. Shader channel 2 is going to the tendons. So a lot of complexity you can add in here, and then you get BPR filters on top of that. But I just wanted to give you a quick tip on how you can create a little bit more interesting of a render by doing that. So let's just present a side-by-side with the skin shade 4, wherever that thing went. You're probably looking at it, waiting for me to just click it. I might even have to pause this to find that thing. I mean, it just like disappeared. Okay, there you go. Better specularity. Okay, better distinction between the different forms. I think that's really nice. It really adds a lot. All right, and then we're able to really get in and focus on treating the muscles as one material that we want to work with, without having to also factor in the tendinous areas, because we're treating them separately. So the model on the right is a little bit more complex. The model on the left is pretty much a simple, straightforward render where everything's treated the same. And I think you can notice the difference. So I hope you found this useful. I hope you're going to apply some of this, and good luck with your sculpting and your rendering.